So my primary interest is in linguistics. And so I thought I'd take some time to just discuss three different phrases that have recently popped up that I think are interesting and try to understand where they came from and how they evolved. The first one is fake news. Now, if you remember back to the last election, there was this trend, very brief trend on Facebook, where some people had figured out that they could just entirely fabricate completely false stories, run them on Facebook, and people would click on them and they could make money. And from what I remember, I believe they primarily targeted Trump supporters. And it was really just a con, right? And that the term fake news was originally created by the media to describe that very particular phenomena. And then what happened was that Trump started using that term and turned it around and started calling the New York Times and other, more liberal or more progressive media organizations fake news. And then that caused a lot of progressives to turn around and start labeling Fox News as fake news. And then suddenly pretty much everything became fake news, which is kind of where we are now. So that's an interesting history to know in relationship to that phrase, because when people use that now to describe the New York Times as fake news or Fox News as fake news, it's not fake, right? Like, something being fake is something being entirely suspect. Like, the whole thing isn't real. And that's not actually what people are meaning mostly, right? When somebody describes Fox News as fake news, what they're saying is essentially that there's this incredible bias and the stories are slanted to a particular political perspective. And so they are taking and selectively picking details and maybe distorting the story by highlighting certain details over others, right? And vice versa. You could say the same thing with NPR and the New York Times and things like that. So, but that's not fake. That's just bias. And, you can have a long discussion about bias in the media, but that is a very different thing from something being completely fake. And so I think that's actually although if there's one solid rule in linguistics, is that people who use language do not care what linguists think about how they should use language. I do think it does this argument a disservice when this term, which again was meant to this very specific thing that happened on Facebook where your stories actually were entirely fake, has now expanded out to just basically label something as biased. What was another one I wanted to talk about? Well, let's see. The other term, canceled. Cancel culture. So before we dive into this one, I think there is a pretty good argument to be made that a lot of the changes that happen in language are relational to the technology that we are surrounded by. Because, if you look out at our environment, the massive changes that have happened have been technological shifts, and they present us with these new things to interact with. And often these new things cause us to extrapolate metaphorically, right? So if you think about a time before trains existed, and then think about trains coming and people now having experience with steam engines and all this stuff, and that the technology of trains, we started to use that to, think about journeys in life, or we use that to think about sex, or all these different things it starts giving access to. And so that is one of the fundamental ways in which language changes over time. It would be interesting to be able to document certain civilizations or cultures which didn't go through the technological upheaval that we've been going through, and to see the rate at which their language and conceptualizations change. So cancel culture. What are the things that get canceled in your life? You cancel. Used to cancel like CD. There are these terrible. God, I can't remember what the name was, but you would get wrapped up in these CD subscriptions where it would be like 14 CDs for $1, and then you'd sign up, and then they just never endingly send you CDs and charge you all this money. And it was basically a scam that was run when I was a little kid that a lot of teenagers got wrapped up in. So you try to cancel those things. You cancel your subscriptions. You cancel your cell phone subscription to AT&T. You cancel magazine subscriptions, and you cancel orders. You cancel orders that you place on the internet. So why has the word canceled emerged in reference to this specific thing that's happening? Well, I think it's because of mainly our interaction with computers and these new services in which your interaction is either signing up or canceling. It's a common thing when there's a controversial mix-up at some place like the New York Times where people say, well, I'm canceling my subscription now. Like that is the threat that they levy, because they view that giving the New York Times money and then taking that money away by canceling is a way to have some kind of voice and punish them, essentially, right? That people are doing that as a punishment. I don't like this thing that you printed. It was either way too progressive or way too conservative, such with the Tom Cotton op-ed. I think there were people that canceled the New York Times subscription because they thought that was over the line, that you shouldn't publish that kind of conservative opinion in the New York Times, and they canceled their subscription, right, as punishment. And so that's where I think this word kind of enters in. Here it comes. And canceling, I'm not going to get too much into that because that is just a huge issue that everyone seems to be talking about. And honestly, it's a little much right now. I'm kind of exhausted with it. But it is a punishment, right? It's in the first one, I wish I could remember her name, but it is this particular mass movement on the internet in which people kind of mob others to declare behavior they find unacceptable. The first example that I know of is a woman who was about to take a flight to Africa and made a terrible, or it was just a dumb off-color joke that she really thought she was maybe just sharing with a few followers that she had, and it just exploded. And by the time her plane landed, she was fired, she had lost friends, her whole life had been, basically the entire internet had decided that she was a horrible human being, and it ruined that part of her life. I mean, there was significant consequences. There's a book written about it. I wish I could remember her name. I can't. But that's generally what people are talking about when I think they refer to that term, canceling, cancel culture, etc. But that term also has seen this kind of creep, right? Where it first started out as these fairly anonymous, non-public people who were brought before kind of the social media world's attention and then punished incredibly severely, way disproportionate to the thing that they did, where they were fired from their job, they lost friends, it ruined relationships, it sent them into therapy, and it was an incredibly destructive force in their life. Now, when people use that term, they use it in relationship to anyone that gets blowback for anything they say on the internet, right? And that is the creep. It's the same conceptual creep that you saw with fake news, where it's silly. It's silly to think of strong online disagreement, even personal disparagement, where you put forward an argument and people basically respond with very complex ways of letting you know that they think you're a terrible human being. Is that canceling? No, I don't think so. I think canceling, again, just like fake news, which the original meaning, I think, in the more specific meaning was better, I also take that same perspective in relationship to canceling. Generally, I think you can call someone officially canceled if they lose their job, if they lose certain positions of in society, if they lose friends. It's a much more complicated issue. I don't have time to get into all of it, but that's generally the point that I wanted to make. Was more about the conceptual creep of those ideas and their relationship to technology. The last one is garbage people. Now this one, I guess you could relate it to technology. But it's very interesting to me as somebody who thinks about metaphor, who thinks about language. It's particularly interesting just because of the whole new language of emojis that has developed and the ways in which those interact with this structure. For instance, when I posted an article on the internet, somebody in response just commented back like 30 different trash can emojis, right? And so the kind of amazing inference that is expected there is, one, what goes in trash cans? Garbage goes in trash cans. What is garbage? I am garbage. And that the fact that there is many trash cans means that I am many times garbage. That's a pretty cool communicative device, and that it's pretty amazing the amount of inference that goes into just something as simple as that that actually has an incredibly multifaceted layers of interpretation. But garbage people, this is a term that I've really only ever seen online. I don't know if I've heard, I guess people say it out loud, but it seems predominantly in relationship to the internet. And it's a pretty simple one, right? Like, garbage is bad, disgusting. It smells bad. It's also just bad for the environment. I think that thinking of garbage in relationship to, I think a lot of the people that use that term are probably very environmentally conscious. And garbage is kind of the worst thing that human beings produce, and just shows their inadequate integration within the environment that all of this garbage is produced. And so garbage is just doubly bad, not, for both of those reasons. And so people that are garbage people are people that are just, horrible. They're toxic, like garbage can be toxic. And basically what I'm doing here is I'm taking this very simple metaphor, and you can go down what are called logical entailments, right? Just think about garbage, then think about people, and then how many different connections can you make between them? And the ones that I went through, I think those are the ones that people expect are highlighted when they use that term, right? There's a million and one attributes of garbage, but when people say that, they're expecting that, you're operating in the five or so, this little network of entailments that they expect you to infer. That's another incredibly complex thing. Like, how do we just know that? Why there are so many other things that could be highlighted by a garbage person. For instance, garbage, like, you're a person, you live in an apartment or a house, and you walk around in your space and you find things that don't belong in your space, that you want out of your space, and you put them in the trash, right? And then the trash man comes and he picks them up, takes them to the dump. So this is the refuse. These are the things that are found not to belong, right? And if you think about the dump, it is probably the space that has the greatest amount of diversity. Because people do this internal sweep of their environment and find things to be unacceptable, and then they all end up in this one place. And the dump, yes, it's probably the place of the richest diversity that you can imagine, of all of these objects, for all of these reasons that people have decided they didn't want. So that is one entailment of thinking about garbage that people don't want you to think about, because that actually goes against with the ideas that they want you to highlight, which is generally, you are a bad person. But this, I think, is the power of art and thinking, to look at the terms that we have, this language that sits between us, understand what people want us to get out of these meanings, but then have the ability to explore and reinterpret, right? And take things that have a dominant social meaning and reorganize and transfigure them in a way which makes them something else. I guess I would be remiss to point out on the third term of garbage people that it experiences the same type of conceptual creep, right? You can think of people who hold ideas which are abhorrent, and they are so abhorrent that you don't want to associate with that person at all. Like, just the fact that they hold that idea makes them unacceptable. It makes them unacceptable to be friends. It makes them unacceptable to even try to sit down and want to have a conversation with them. And it makes them want to, you to shield yourself from that, like people who are actual white supremacists, who believe the white race is superior to other races. There are garbage ideas in the sense that there are ideas that have sat in this cultural home that we all live in, and that we have deemed are not worthwhile being in the space, and so have removed them and sent them to the dump, right? And that makes perfect sense. Like, I'm glad that ideas like, I can't remember the phrenology, right? Ideas that the shape of your skull represent some kind of inference into your behavior. It's a garbage idea. Glad we took that idea from our home and sent it to the dump, right? Because there are just certain ideas that are so wrong, they're just no longer worth thinking about. But that term, again, there's this creep where if somebody agrees with you at a 49 of 50 ideas you have about society, but they disagree with you about one and express it, that makes you a garbage person now, right? It makes you a garbage person even though you have nearly identical shared views of, how we successfully move society into a more fair, just place. And so that's the conceptual creep of that idea. And I think it is a fair argument to say that people's ability, that's the wrong way to say it. People are more likely to label somebody as a garbage person now. It takes so little to get you there. Whereas before that, there was a higher standard, right? And I really do think that has to do with the ability to discern people's intentions. And, is this person a well-meaning person that is making an argument, that is interested in hearing other ideas and can change their mind if they encounter better information? Or are we just dealing with a troll who's just enjoying messing with people? And most of the time on the internet, it seems like we're dealing with trolls and people that just generally enjoy messing with people and aren't actually putting forward good arguments. And so I feel like that's predisposed us, both on the internet and in real life, to assume bad intentions. And when you assume bad intentions, you can read almost any comment that people make, and you can come up with a shitty meaning or a nefarious interpretation of what that person actually wants and desires. And then infer that they are now a garbage person. It's like, oh, you said this, but what you really meant was this. And you really meant that because this is your fundamental belief, and you're actually a horrible person wanting to do blah, 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 right? It's a very simple trick because there is this black box of human intentionality that exists in all human interactions and provides people a space where they can drop in good intentions and bad intentions and then extrapolate from that. There's a whole subgenre now on the internet of just hate reading, right? And basically it is that you read this thing in order to find the extrapolations that this person is a terrible human being. And you read it and you just catalog them all the way down. And then you present that as the body of evidence. Well, can I interpret this as, they were shitty and just wanted to hurt people by writing this sentence? Well, sure you can, right? You can do that with just about everything. So yeah, I guess if I had to sum this up, I would say, be wary of conceptual creep in our ideas, right? Because these words emerge. They usually emerge pointing to this very specific thing that happened. And then people, as the popularity of them grows, people just, partly I think because we're lazy and words catch on and we like participating in new words, like we feel like we're part of the culture when we adopt these new phrases and can all use them together. But we just start using them for everything. It's like getting a new toy and just taking it with you all the time, and suddenly everything is in reference to this new toy that you found. There's nothing to do about that. That's just what human beings do with language. But I think it's worth being aware that that's what happens. You get this new term, it gets super popular, people use it for all different ways that pushes the boundaries of the term, that makes some people uncomfortable, and that there is, language is just this constant argument between people about what things mean. Some people push them too far, some people don't push them far enough, and this is just the inherent dilemma of language, of creating these categories, trying to maintain these categories as the world changes around us. All right. Now I'm really gonna drink some coffee.